Now, let's get started. So welcome to Cats in the Corner Office, our online speaker series featuring highly accomplished UA alumni. I'm very pleased today to introduce our guest, Paul Moyer. Paul is a broadcast icon. As a news anchor in Los Angeles, he covered many of the notable news stories of our time. He co-anchored the 5 and 11 p.m. weekday editions of KNBC's Channel 4 News in Los Angeles, joining KNBC in 1972 and returning in 1992 after 13 years with rival station KABC. We'll have to talk about that. Paul's journalism awards include a Lifetime Achievement Award and 20 Golden Mikes and LA Area Emmy Awards for his reports on the bombing at the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta and the O.J. Simpson trial, and much more. In 2005, he reported KNBC's Peabody Award-winning initiative series on environmental hazards in the Playa Vista neighborhood of Southwest Los Angeles. After graduating from the University of Arizona with a bachelor's degree in economics, Paul initially worked in radio broadcasting. After moving to television, he spent almost a decade working at stations in Sacramento, Peoria, St. Louis, Pittsburgh, and New York City before returning to Los Angeles, his hometown. So we have a few questions ready for you, and then we've got more I'm sure that our audience will be sending in.
By the way, you're very good.
Oh, well, thank you. That means a lot coming from an icon like you.
Oh, please.
So we have a lot of questions, and this is just going to be a great conversation for us to learn a little bit more
Super.
about you and the impact of the university on your life. Super. So let's start with a little bit about your background. So tell me more about your career and the path you took to achieve what you did.
You know, Melinda, it started right here on campus.
That's great.
I was a senior. I needed money to finish my education. My grandmother cut me off because she wanted me to be a dentist, and I didn't want to do that, so no more tuition for me. So I had that radio thing in my head, you know, gee, I'd like to try that sometime. And I basically went around town knocking on doors to get a job at a radio station. I didn't have a tape. I just, you know, I'm here. And didn't go well until KOLD. Went to KOLD. At that time, it was kind of like a shack in the back of the TV station. And they said, yeah, you know, you want to open up the station on Sunday morning at 6 o'clock and put it on the air? I said, sure, absolutely. So they showed me how to do it, pull the things, and I did. I came in at 6 o'clock in the morning, introduced the Mormon Tabernacle Choir for about 4 or 5 hours, and then I did a record show in the afternoon. And that was my first job. I did that for about 2 or 3 months, and then I had an afternoon record show there and was the sports director because I thought I wanted to do sports. But, you know, it was a little tiny station, but it gave me some great experience, and then I heard that KTKT was going to hire a new disc jockey. Well, that was the big station.
Sure, I remember
it was
KTKT.
Huge. Frank Khalil.
Yeah, sure.
Jerry Stowe. And I took my tape down there, and I met Mr. Khalil, and they played it. It was huge speakers. And he said, you know, I really like, would you like to do Midnight to 6?
Oh my gosh.
I said, well, sure. So I did. I did Midnight to 6, and I went to school at the same time.
Wow.
And I was called PM in the AM. That was my disc jockey moniker. And, you know, you talk like this, it's 99 degrees in Tucson. And, but it was a job, you know. So I did that for a while. I don't want to be long. I graduated and went home. Didn't know really what I was going to do with my life, you know, like so many kids that get out of college. Sold cars for Yeckel, Plymouth, and Downey with my friend Steve Shukin. Repoed cars for about 6 to 8 months, which was a great job because it's legalized car theft. And, you know, I did that. Then I went to Don Martin School of Radio and TV Broadcasting. In order to work at a small station at that time, you had to have a FCC license. And so you get it at Don Martin's. It was in Hollywood. I went there. And they kind of had a radio class, you know, they teach you more about radio, so I did that. And there was a guy named Don Lafer who was a teacher there. And he said, you know, you really ought to try TV. I said, oh, I don't do TV. He said, we got a couple of old cameras, and here's some wire copy, and we got a couple of commercials, film that we run. We'll do a newscast. And we did. And he said, you know, you could really do this. And, you know, we did a couple of more. And then it was time to graduate from Don Martin's and get a job, you know, in the real world. And this, I think, is a great lesson. You don't do it that way now, but I made a tape in my kitchen with a big tape recorder. got in my car and drove all the way around the state of California, going to radio stations and saying, excuse me, I've got a tape, I'm looking for a job. Nobody bit, and I was on my way home, and I stopped in Sacramento at KXOA Radio, walked in, did the same thing, and the program director came out to see me, probably to say goodbye. And we were talking, and I told him I went to Don Martin's, and he said, oh, I went there. His name was Les Thompson. Yeah, wow, let me listen to your tape. So he took me back. And he did, and he said, listen, because you went to Don Martin's, he said, my news director is leaving in a couple of weeks. Would you like to do that? Could you start in a couple of weeks? And I went, are you kidding?
Wow.
Of course. And I got the job as news director.
Wow.
And did that for 6 months, covered the Capitol, But I wanted to get into TV, and I had a friend from Don Martin's that became the chief engineer at a TV station in Chico, California. So after midnight one night, we kind of snuck into the station, and he fired up the tape machine, and I had some wire copy, and I did a faux newscast. And I used that tape, went around, everybody said, oh, we like you, but you're too young. So I put an ad in Broadcasting Magazine, which probably isn't around anymore, and I got 3 replies. Jackson, Mississippi, Savannah, Georgia, and Sioux City, Iowa. I didn't think I'd go in Jackson or Savannah, but I sent the tape to Sioux City. And they said, yeah, we you want to come back and do the noon news? And I said, sure. They said, oh, by the way, can you shoot film? I said, of course I can shoot film. I can't
Had
shoot
you
film.
ever shot film?
No, I'd never seen a camera to shoot film. The old Bell and Howell camera. I said, of course. They said, fine. So I went out and bought a book, How to Shoot Film on a Bell and Howell camera. Anyway, I went back there and I did 6 months there, got the 6 o'clock news, got a call from Peoria for $40 more a week, went to Peoria. I didn't do the news, I hosted the news. I introduced all the news guys sitting on a stool. And I said, it was WMBD, and it was like, WMBD presents Peoria Today, brought to you by Draft Brewed Blatz Beer. And, I had to be careful with that one. So I did that. I went to St. Louis for 6 months. It kept, And then I got a call from somebody that was in town from Pittsburgh, KDKA, which is a great station. They said, would you like to come do the news here? I did, 4 years. Wow. And I decided I want to go to New York because that was the big time, and I had a chance to go to WCBS TV in New York through an agent. So they finally consented to hire me. The same building that Walter Cronkite worked in, that was like nirvana to me. And the deal was that I would be a reporter, and they would try out 3 guys to co-anchor the 11 o'clock news with Jim Jensen, who was a legend in New York. And it was my first fail. I didn't get it because they hired the guy that had been there for 20 years. Well, duh, everybody knew who he was, right? So, I was kind of devastated, honestly, and I asked the news director if I could get out of the contract early because I wanted to go home to Los Angeles. He said, sure. So I went back to LA over Christmas vacation, holiday, and 2 auditions. One for NBC on the same day, which was horrible. It was horrible. I hated it. And the next one was for Channel 7 KBC, which was terrific. I thought that was really good. ABC said, yeah, we'd like to have you, but we have to get rid of this guy, and it's going to take a couple of months. NBC said, yeah, we want you. I don't want to go there, but okay. So took the family, put them in the car, came back to LA, and did the weekend news at NBC. Then I got the 6 o'clock when Tom Snyder went to New York. And then I got the 11 o'clock when Tom Brokaw went to Washington. Wow. And I thought it was all going really well. I did a Sunday show, which was a talk show, live talk show. It was 90 minutes, which was a great learning ground. And they decided, from 72 to 79, they decided, you know what, we're going to give your 11 o'clock news to somebody else. And you can continue to do the Sunday show, but we want you to be a reporter. And one of the executive producer took me out to dinner, and he said, Paul, you're not going to be a major anchor. It just isn't going to happen. Fail. Okay, that's the second fail. And they said, we want your answer next week and what you're going to do. And I gave them my answer live on the Sunday show, basically. I told people goodbye. The station manager walked into the general manager's office and said, Paul just gave you his answer, he's leaving, Wow. So I left. And It was a major fail. It was a bad time in my life, but there's a moral here. And I was out of work for about 6 months, and my agent got me a job at Channel 7 as a senior correspondent. And I took it and did that for a while, and then I got the 5 o'clock news and did that, and then I got the 11 o'clock news. Long story. But the fails are what got me where I wanted to go. You know, it's interesting. You can't be afraid to fail. And that's what kids have to know.
Yeah. I think that's a very important lesson.
No, it is. It really is. You know, I think some of the most successful people I know are people that have failed. And they get up and they learn from it and they go on. But that's basically it. I mean, 37 years in LA, almost 50 total. Wow. And, my body finally told me after 37 years doing the late news and the early news, it's time, it's time.
Yeah.
The commute is too much, and it was just time to retire, so I did.
Well, I heard a lot of really interesting lessons in what you just shared with us. I mean, this idea how hard you worked to find where you wanted to be, going to Sioux City, Iowa. You didn't automatically walk into your dream job. It sounded like that was a long, hard path that you followed to get there.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Sioux City was very interesting because my wife and I put our stuff in a 59 Ford convertible, I think, and just, it was like 19 below when we got there. Couldn't find the station. Underneath a pool hall, we found it. But yeah, I mean that's what you have to do in this business. And you don't do it like that anymore. You probably do it online, But you've got to just keep trying. You've got to just want it. You've got to really want it. If you're going to get into this business, you've got to want it. You've got to want to do it. And you've got to just be really tenacious about it.
How important were the relationships you made along the way? It also sounds like you had a lot of people at various points in your career who pointed you in either the right direction or a different direction. Yeah,
we were talking about that this morning. Absolutely terribly important. The connections you make, you meet people, and like the guy in Sacramento, I mean, he went to the same broadcast school. But you have these connections, and you've got to use those. It's not like, I always used to think that you go to work every day, do your job, and go home. You're fine. It really is who you know and the people that you meet along the way that help you. It might be somebody that you met at a party. It might be a relative. Of course I was in a position to do it, but I got my son a job at Fox. I didn't get him the job. All I did was got him the interview. But that's the kind of thing you've got to,
Did you have a secret to how you managed that network or the relationships, how you did it? Or is that just part of the secret sauce? That's just the magic that happens.
I think it's part of the secret sauce. I do. There's a certain amount of luck in it, being in the right time, Sacramento, but you make that. You make that luck. You got to be good to be lucky, and by just reaching out all the time, and if somebody says no, that's okay. You just keep trying. Rejection's part of it. But to get into broadcasting, be it news or whatever, you've got to want to love it, you've got to want it, and you've got to keep trying. And, for people that are thinking about getting into it, I had a lot of people in LA, I'd make a speech or something, and I want to start in Los Angeles. No, sorry, doesn't work that way.
Doesn't work that way.
You've got to go to a small market. That's where you start. That's where you learn. So when you get to the media market, you know what you're doing. And when you get to LA, you really know what you're doing. So you got to start in a small market.
That's great. Great advice. So let's go back even a little earlier than starting your career. Tell us about your time at the U of A. Why did you come to the University of Arizona?
That's interesting. I graduated from high school when I was 16, just going on 17, because my mom decided that I was going to skip second grade. Don't ever do that with your kids. Don't ever do that. I was 2 years younger than most of my friends. So when I got out of high school, I was, like I say, really young, and I stayed out of college for a year because of that. Played baseball, pretty good pitcher in high school, little league, whatever. And I had an uncle who, his two sons, my cousins, went to the U of A. Uncle Jack, I don't know where I want to go. I've been accepted to Santa Barbara. No, you should go to Arizona. It's a great school. You can play baseball there. I said, well, I don't know anybody. I haven't got a scholarship. So I did. Got accepted to the U of A and jumped into my car one night, 46 Plymouth that I got from my cousin, drove all night to get to the university, stayed in Yuma at a motel. I was scared to death. But I was really scared when I came. Like, I'd never been away from home.
Great.
I mean, it was, traumatic. But that's why I came here. Got here and, 3 weeks later, I mean, I just really grew up when I got here and fell in love with this place. There was something about the campus, very much smaller than it is now, and it was just really gorgeous and self-contained and really nice. And I felt really at home here. And played baseball, walk-on for a couple of years. I remember that very well. And one of my best memories, and I know that a lot of people don't like them, especially today, but fraternities. I mean, I had breakfast with my buddies this morning, I was an ATO. That was a wonderful experience for me because, again, I grew up, I became a man here, doing that stuff. And, but that's what brought me here. And majored in economics because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I mean, I still had that broadcasting thing in my mind, but majored in economics.
It's a great major.
That
gives you many options.
Oh, no, when you don't want to know what you want to do, you major in business. That's how it works, But economics was great. I mean, I really enjoyed it. And then, like I said, I got the job here, and that's how it started.
Well, and to your point on Greek life, it's actually a very important part of the life of this university. So we have about 5,000 students involved in Greek life at the U of A. Yes, so it is a very positive. We just dedicated our new Geraldo Rivera Greek Heritage Park yesterday. You should go see it if you have a moment.
Well, you see, I'm here because they couldn't get Geraldo.
Oh, that's not true. That is not true.
No, he did go here, didn't he?
He did go here, yes. And he's on campus also this week. So this is our week for Icon.
He was here last year. My wife saw him.
Yeah.
Dad, Paul, there's Geraldo. I know, Becky. I know who he is. I met him.
Well, so it is true that Greek life can just have such a profound impact on your experience and provide that community, especially if you don't know anyone.
And some of the best friends that I still have are those guys. If I was in trouble, those are the ones I call.
Well, so what are some of those, the ones you can talk about? What are some of the great memories you have of the U of A?
Well, that's certainly one of them.
Yeah.
Boondockers we used to have.
Okay.
Those are great. I think.
Did you have a favorite bar?
Yeah, the Grant Road Tavern.
Grant Road Tavern, favorite restaurant?
We didn't. We used to go there and play the locals in pool.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah, and they didn't really like it when we won. They did not like that at all. But we used to hang out there. Used to go to Nogales a lot. Used to go to Bob's Big Boy on Broadway, I think.
I remember, yeah.
And used to cruise Speedway. I mean, cruise it. Casa Molina out of the end, When I brought my wife here the first time to Tucson for homecoming, I said, Becky, I love this place. You've got to, first thing you got to see is my favorite street, Speedway.
Speedway?
And I took her on Speedway. She goes, I don't know. I don't know if I like Tucson or not. But those were some of our haunts. Yeah.
That's great. So you may have touched on this already, but some of the early lessons about how to be successful. You think about 21-year-olds coming out of the university today. What were some of the early things you learned that you think would be relevant to today's?
I did touch on one, and that is you've got to really want to do what you're going to do. And there's people that I know that are successful love what they're doing. They really, truly do. I maintain that a lot of people in this country, maybe most, don't like their jobs. But they stay in them because they need them and they have families. But the passion and really loving what you do is important. Being tenacious is important. I think being decisive is important. You've got to make decisions and, you weigh the evidence and you make them, okay? I think we were talking about, I think politics within a company, be it broadcast or whatever, is, new regimes come in, okay? And you've got to be aware of what's going on. You've got to kind of walk that. Example, I was at Channel 7 in Los Angeles, and I think doing very well. I loved it there. I loved the woman, Ann Martin, that I co-anchored with and still do to this day. But Cap Cities bought ABC. And at the time, ABC was spending money like it was water. I mean, I did a show called Eye on LA, which was really Eye on the World. They sent me all over the place.
Wow.
First class. You want to bring Becky? No problem. Cap Cities bought ABC, and they didn't believe in any of that. No limos, no first class. And there was a guy named Larry Pollock who ran the stations division that didn't believe anchormen should make a lot of money. And except if you're in Philadelphia, because that was the station that he ran. Oh, he can make a lot of money, but not guys in LA. So the whole thing changed. And my contract was up, and you know, they said, okay, here's a pretty good offer. And we said, no, Paul's got a much better offer from NBC. No, we're not gonna pay it. So I walked in one day, I literally walked in the station one day. News director called me in, who was really a friend of mine, and says, I've been told to tell you that if you don't sign your contract today, we're taking you off the air. I don't vibrate to that kind of ultimatum. And I said, Terry, I'll do the 5. I'm leaving. If that's what you want, I'm out of here. Was that a fail? Not really. But
No,
again,
right.
I was like,
That,
you know,
that
and then
was
I
making a decision. You were
exactly.
being pretty decisive.
And then I went back to NBC. But I think being aware of your political surroundings is very important, especially in broadcasting. You know, new news director can come in, new GM. That's important. But successful people just want it, and they know how to get it, and they are passionate about what they do. Not all of them, but most of them. And I think that's really important.
That's great. That's great. So I have a question from the audience. This comes from James. How long did it take you to become a news anchor?
Not long, because I was willing to go to Sioux City.
Because you were in Sioux City.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I say, I sent them a tape, and they said, okay, noon news, you know, which is an anchor. I came on after the priest blessed everybody, and then he introduced me. No, seriously. And then I came on. No, Jim, not long. But I was lucky. But all during the move up, I was a reporter, and that's really important. You know, not just an anchor, a reporter. And in many respects, especially at Channel 4 the last time with investigative stories, I really kind of enjoyed doing those and the interviews, which I loved, more than the in-studio stuff. The in-studio stuff and reading the prompter pays the bills, but I really enjoyed that.
Well, and actually, that's my next question. I'd love to hear more about some of those more memorable stories that you've covered, where you've done the investigative reporting.
Well, of course, we were talking, 9/11 was one, but what's interesting about 9/11 is that I was asleep. My wife came and woke me up, and she said, Paul, I think you better watch this. She said, this is going to be the biggest story of the week, is what she said. And I'm looking at them, oh my God. And so I started to then I saw the second plane, and this, boom, in the car. But for 3 days, we didn't do anything. Basically, we did cut-ins. The network took the whole thing, but we did cut-ins. That had a big impact, but the O.J. Simpson case was unbelievable because, A, I knew him, and I lived near him. And so that was kind of interesting to me. But it just captured the whole country.
It did.
I mean, in Los Angeles, people weren't going to work. And I would get up in the morning and turn the radio on, and all day.
Wow.
Because I did the 5, I did an OJ show on CNBC network, and then I did the 11, so I had to know.
Wow.
And we owned that story. KNBC Channel 4 owned that story because of a guy named Peter O'Connell, who was a producer, and we just owned it. The ratings were high, and I lived it, and we all did, so that is one that just, I remember when the verdict came down, my co-anchor Colleen and I were holding hands, I swear to God.
Really?
Yeah, it was like, wow,
Wow.
it was just like that.
So you were there for the chase on the freeway. You started all the way
Not
through
only that, but yeah, Colleen and I were sitting in the studio for some reason, I don't remember. And somebody said, oh, look at that. And I looked and I saw Christ, that's OJ in the Bronco. Jesus. And our chopper guy was then over it, and we did the whole thing. And I had an advantage because I knew where he was going, because I lived there, and I knew the streets he was going to take exactly. And so I kind of told people where he was going to go, and he did. And yeah, that chase was, you know, Al Cowlings, who became kind of a friend of mine after that happened. You know, he's got a gun, OJ's got a gun. It was just amazing. And one quick little thing that I found is kind of personal, but my wife's relatives were moving to England, and we wanted to have a dinner party for them. And Becky said, I know, there's a place called Mezzaluna down there on San Vicente. I don't know how many people are going to remember this. But I said, okay, so we went and had the dinner, and it was very nice. The murders happened the next day, next night, and a couple of days later, somebody called the station and said, tell Paul that his waiter was Ron Goldman.
Oh my, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I went, wow. He was, and I remember him as being rebuffed out, good-looking guy, kind of troubled. I don't know why, but he was kind of troubled. And the next night, he went back to pick up the classes. But it was like, that was kind of eerie to me.
Wow.
Yeah. But OJ, that was, and also the bombing in Atlanta was, you know, we were covering it in '96, and we
During the
were
Olympics.
in Centennial Park. And we would do our 11 o'clock, which was 8 o'clock in Atlanta, and we would, it was so hot, we'd go out and listen to a band called Jack Mack and the Heart Attack, I think. And I would take off the pants trousers and wear shorts because it was hot. So I'm standing out there and I hear the bomb. I'm 80 feet away. That's how we kind of figured it. And I heard it, but more than that, I felt it. You could just feel the reverb going through the air. And we ran into the studio. We had a makeshift studio there, and got the people on the phone back in Burbank, and I was screaming, get us on the air now. Get us on the air. Well, we can't do that, Paul. We have to call the network. I know you don't. Just get us on the air. And we couldn't, because the network had to give permission, because these commercials they were running are worth millions of dollars, right? So we went to another studio, drove to the studio, and finally got on the air. And did our coverage, which was amazing, because we were the only local station there. And, you know, got done and flew back to LA and yada, yada, yada. And I started hearing, Paul, you weren't wearing your pants. You were wearing shorts. People saw that. I had this suit and a tie and a pair of shorts. And that's what people were talking about. It was amazing.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, I didn't know. I mean, I just ran out of there, you know, to go to the studio. And they were saying, Moyer, you to get out of there, we're going to come in after you. So I forgot the pants and wore the shorts, which was kind of interesting.
Wow.
Actually.
That's a great story. Well, and I've got another interesting question that's come in right here that says, your career as a television broadcast journalist, especially in Los Angeles and Hollywood, led you to some interesting side work. You appeared as yourself in a number of television shows and movies, like the film Heat with Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, and multiple episodes of The West Wing on NBC. What were those experiences like in contrast to your day job? That's a great question, Brett.
Brett, how do you know that?
I don't know. He's a student of yours, a big fan. So
very interesting, as a matter of fact. Heat, they filmed quite a bit of it at NBC in those, you know, the studios and whatever. Pacino, De Niro, and they said, would you like to play a newscaster? And I said, well, yeah, I think I would, you know, a movie like that. So it was 11 o'clock, after the 11 o'clock news on Friday. I was tired, everybody's tired on Friday. And Michael Mann, who was the director, his daughter came in to the station and put a VHS or whatever in the machine and said, okay, here's your script, just go out there and do it. And I said, okay, and I was dead tired. And it was something like breaking news in LA, there's been a shooting, yada, yada, yada. I did it like once or twice, and that was it. That was it. And I went to the movie with my wife, and there was a guy coming out of the movie, and he said, you're not going to believe what they do when you come on, the audience. I went, oh God, what is this going to be? So we're watching the movie, and I kind of got down behind the seat because I didn't even want to see it. I never like to see myself on TV.
You don't like to watch yourself?
No, never. And it comes on, and one guy goes, "Hey, he's in the theater," and they were all like, they thought that was funny that I was in the movie and all that stuff. But that was an interesting experience. The West Wing was arduous because they came into the studio with their cameras, and I had to read these election results over and over and over for 2 days. And it was really tiring. But, I still get little tiny checks from that. I
do you
still
really?
get residuals from that, yeah, I do.
Oh, that's great.
But it was fun. I really enjoyed that. I mean, if I'm going to do another movie, I don't want to play newscaster. I want to play bank robber or something.
Bank robber.
Yeah.
Superhero?
Huh?
Superhero,
No,
maybe? No?
no,
Oh,
no.
okay.
Too old for that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So we have another question from the audience. This is from Christina, class of 2017. Was there ever a moment in your career that was challenging or not perfect, not ideal, but proved to be a pivotal moment in a way you couldn't have predicted? Kind of goes to our conversation around failure.
Wow.
Maybe the unexpected positive
What a
things.
great question
It
that
is. That's a tough one. So good luck. Let's see.
Well, it was uncomfortable, but it was at Channel 4, the one I remember. One of the ones I remember that I went to dinner with the executive producer, and I didn't know this was coming. And he said, we're going to replace you on the 11 o'clock news. I said, why? It's doing well. Well, we just feel that this other guy can do a better job. This was political, by the way. This was me not paying attention to what was going on.
Interesting. Okay.
This was me not realizing that the same people that had seen that tape and liked it a lot now were a little, not really in my corner. And I don't mean to go on about this question, but I think it's important. I wasn't paying attention. And there was a little, he looks like Tom Snyder, and people think you're brothers, and we didn't look like we had the same mannerisms. That was hurtful to me. That was really a tough time for me. He ended up being one of my dear friends. But we're at this dinner, and he says to me, somebody else is going to replace you, and Paul, you're not going to be a major anchor. It just isn't going to happen for you. And you're not going to make that kind of money. It just, you're not. So, to go home with that was really hard.
Sure.
But I didn't realize it at the time that was a huge turning point for me because it got me to Channel 7. And that was where I made my chops. That's where it really happened because they allowed me to do the other stuff, the Eye on LA. When Regis Philbin left the morning show, they said, would you like to do it for a couple of years? I said, yeah, I really like that. Yeah, it was frothy, but it gave me a chance to, to expand. And you took that and you put it into the news and you became a little bit more human, and that was a risk. That could have failed because Regis was a god on morning television. I could have just gone on, failed, but I did. It was a risk. Again, you take risks. Which is a long way of saying that night when he said, we're taking away your news, was a turning point.
Was a turning point.
Yeah.
Great. Great answer. So now I have another question or a note from Ralph Bianco. You know Ralph Bianco,
Yeah,
a fellow
I know
ATO
Ralph Bianco.
fraternity brother. Upon graduating from the U of A, I took a commission in the U.S. Air Force and flew combat missions in Vietnam. I'll never forget the TV interview you did with the wife of a fellow ATO who came back from Vietnam. His son was visiting, and he took him for a ride in an Air Force Flying Club aircraft. He crashed and was killed, but his son survived. It was certainly one of the best journalistic pieces of work I've ever seen.
Wow. Ralph, thank you. Ralph and I lived together in an apartment my senior year.
You did his wife interview.
Oh,
Ralph is here with us.
look, not only, Ralph's here?
Is that Ralph?
I'm Ralph.
There's Ralph. Yeah.
Hi, Ralph.
How you doing, Bob?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you doing?
Good.
Good,
I
good.
just thought since you were telling,
Well,
what Big showed you.
Ralph, would you mind using our mic?
Story was fantastic.
Would you mind using our microphone?
I can expand on that.
Okay.
I can tell that
Well, I
story.
think that was a very personal story, and it's a part of what we lived here at the U of A. When
Yeah, he said it was a very personal story, part of my experience at U of A. You bet it was.
Yeah, Yeah, and I remember you had the wife on, and my
well,
daughter sent that
The
video of that to me.
Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that?
The man's name is Darryl Pyle, and he was an ATO, and he was a big, tough guy. He was, you know, he had my back a few times, if you know what I mean. He and I used to spend a long time talking about flying, because I thought at one time I wanted to be a Navy pilot. You know, that was very romantic. You know, landing on the pitching deck and all that stuff.
Right.
I passed all the stuff. I didn't do it. But Darryl and I used to talk about flying. He did it. He went into the Air Force. And back then, you know, you went to Vietnam when you were a pilot. He did. Got shot down. Spent 7 years in a POW camp in Hanoi.
Wow.
Came home in '73, I think it was. The famous TV coverage of the guys getting off the plane. And my wife and I were watching that. And there's Darryl. Look at, there's Darryl. We got all excited. He came home. I believe they were divorced at that time, or they got divorced shortly after that. I'm not sure. But he took his son flying, I think it was Alaska, in a small plane. I assume Darryl was flying it. I don't know. And I think it was carburetor ice. If you're a pilot, you know what that is, because I am one. And the plane crashed. So here is a guy who spent 7 years in a prisoner of war camp, and he dies in a small plane in Alaska. You know, there's no justice.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was just heartbreaking. And I guess I interviewed his wife.
His son survived.
Yeah, the son did survive,
He
you're right.
walked like 7, 8, 10 miles.
Yeah, the son survived. But that's how it happened,
Wow.
and I interviewed her, and you know, it was very sad for him, for his family.
Wow. Well, thank you, Ralph. So, what about bad career advice? Have you ever been given any really bad advice regarding your career?
Oh God. Yeah. When I was about 14 or 15, went to called Cotillion, which is dancing, you know, parties every week. And my grandmother thought I should do that. And the girl that I went with every week, her name was Victoria Douglas. Her father was Donald Douglas Jr. of Douglas Aircraft.
Wow.
I didn't want to go. I didn't want to be. Little did I know. Hey, wait a minute. But anyway, there's an opportunity missed. But I remember having dinner at his house with Victoria, and I told him I was interested in going into that. Don't do that. Why? Bad people. Bad people. You don't want to do that. You do something else. You know, work in a bank. Do something. Don't go into broadcasting, Paul. It's horrible. You really won't succeed, and you won't like it.
Wow.
Well, Don, guess what?
You proved him wrong.
You built planes, and I went
Yeah.
into broadcasting. But that's one that comes to mind.
That's great. So I have a question from Mitchell, the class of 2016. As you look back on your career, what for you was the best part?
I think two. I think in the beginning, I think those adventures, you know, that we had, my then wife and I had, in Sioux City, Peoria, St. Louis, Pittsburgh. You know, I wouldn't trade that. You know, there were some hard times, but we had fun. You know, it was
That's
just like,
great.
let's just go for it. Just do it, you know, and another part of the country. So the beginning, those times. And here in the radio, I just love that. I absolutely love that. And yeah, it was great when you know, get to the top and you do all that stuff. The investigative stories, I think, were things I really enjoyed. But I loved the beginning. I really did. Because, you know, I went for it. And that's what you have to do. And, you know, but those are the things that I really remember.
That's
the times.
great. That's great. So a question from the audience. How have you seen the journalism and broadcasting industries change over the course of your career? Did you see them change quite a bit?
Oh, my Lord.
This comes from Jackie, class of 09.
Jackie, unbelievably so, and is changing as we speak. I mean, I was lucky, you know. I mean, I got in, sort of the wave was doing this, you know, and I kind of rode it, you know. And I got out when that wave was starting to break, I mean, I fed at that trough for a long time. But in the beginning, broadcast news was a public service. That's what it was, okay? 15-minute broadcast on the network. Nobody really cared who was, you know, you had to do it, you did it. And then people discovered, the bosses discovered that you could make money on it by running commercials. You know, and then it became a ratings, you know, ratings were very, very important. And it kind of changed the business a little bit. And that went for a long time. And now, there are no more franchise anchors. By that I mean people that make the millions of dollars that kind of hold up the newscast. And, you know, they're the ones that people know and recognize. They're gone. You know, I was the last man standing, I think. It just, that's, there may be a few. So that's really changed. Because of the, you know, the cable stations first, and now the computers and the streaming, and people watch it on the phones now, you know. The ratings on local news have gone way, way down. The audience is a fragmentation of what it used to be. So therefore, the stations don't make as much money on it. Therefore, they have to cut their costs. Therefore, and I must say this and be brutally honest, you don't make as much money doing it nowadays. Reporters don't, anchors don't, weather people don't. Not like, you know, not like it used to be. So that has really changed the business. And I don't think, and a news director told me this, that they've really recovered from the Great Recession back in 08 and 09. No, I don't think broadcasters, local news has recovered from that. So, yeah, that marketplace has changed. That's totally different. You know, the other things, there are no more people behind cameras in studios, they're robotics, but, you know, when I was in New York, we had 3-man crews. We had the camera guy, the sound guy, and the lighting guy. Now it's no guy sometimes, you know, you do your own. And the future is, you're not going to see the big vans, the trucks that have the mass. The camera guy's going to have a pack on his back. And because of, you know, going online or whatever, he's going to be able to do the whole thing, you know, with that equipment. So that's all changed. Is it as much fun now? You know, I can't say because I haven't been in it for a long time. I doubt it. I don't think so. I mean, I can't say that really because I don't know. I'm sure it is. But it's just totally, totally different.
You know, do you have any thoughts on, without getting too political here, but it's interesting how much criticism the media is taking today. Do you have any thoughts about the media and the way they're
funny you should
covering
mention that.
politics? I mean, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on how you think they're doing. How's the media today? Can you give them a grade?
I think a lot of times that criticism, depending on where it's coming from, is warranted. I think, I hate to say it, I think there's a media bias, you know, right now in our political world. I'm not going to go into details. I don't want to talk about the election. It'll be dated.
Neither do I.
I don't want to infuriate 50% of the people that are watching this.
Right. But you certainly have a unique perspective. I'm
you know,
curious.
I think a lot of times it's not, but I think a lot of times it is. I think that if you're going to be a commentator, then please label it commentator. That's fine, you know. But if you're supposed to be an impartial anchor, reporter, you know, you gotta. I think it's very important for young people coming up in business. You know, being objective is so important. I don't care what your personal feelings are.
Right.
But I was taught to do that, and I tried to do that. I think that's really important, and I think sometimes we're getting away from that. So yeah, there's a media bias.
Interesting. Well, thank you. So when you think about some of the most successful people you've worked with, what characteristics do they share?
A love for what they're doing.
Okay.
Definitely a love for what they're doing. You want me to talk about broadcasting people or just people in general?
No, from your field, yeah.
Yeah, broadcasting people, and this is important for people graduating from the U of A or any college that want to be broadcasters. Being real, and I know that sounds trite and simplistic, but just being real, being you. I can look at a tape, news directors can look at a tape in 15 or 20 seconds and tell you, you know, is that really real? Is that somebody who really knows what they're talking about or not? It's like that. I think that's really important. I think on a resume, I think people that want to get into broadcasting, I think news directors now are looking for people that have a kind of a wide variety of knowledge. In other words, the journalism school is great, but I think along with that, political science, history, liberal arts, I think the more knowledge you have of the world around you and what's going on is really important to the people that hire. So I think that's important I think successful people have that. Knowing the market, if you're going to go to work in a small market, study it, read up on it. Know that it's Gila Bend, not Gila Bend. You know what I'm saying?
That's great, yeah.
No, and I think that's important, but a desire, really a drive to do it. And if you have that and you're willing to fail, then I think there's more chance of being successful than not.
Well, you sought out some great experiences while you were a student here, where you could really test your interests, right? Having those kind of student engagement opportunities or internships while you're an undergrad really served you well.
Yeah, no, they did. They did, absolutely. I mean, I think if you're in the TV or the radio school here, and I haven't been back for a while, so I don't know how big that is, but if you're doing that, that's fine. But any opportunity you have, internship is great. Anytime you can be behind that microphone, I don't care what you're doing. Anytime you can be in front of that camera, I don't care what you're doing. I used to practice. I had a tape recorder. I hate it when people say back in the old days. I was in a bar one time in Bakersfield waiting to audition for a job there, and there was an old anchor from Cleveland sitting next to me. He introduced himself and we started talking. He regaled me with stories about the good old days in Cleveland. And I made a point to tell myself I would never do that. So I don't want it to sound like that. But I think the principles are the same.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like that. That's good. No,
I mean, I've got a friend who was a reporter at New York and then joined me in LA as a reporter. His son is at Oregon, University of Oregon. And he's had numerous internships. He's now working part-time at one of the local radio stations. He's a senior. He does promos for them, from his internships.
That's great.
So, yeah,
Great.
you take advantage of those things whenever you can.
That's great. Good advice. All right, now we have another question from our audience, from Angelina, who's a current UA film and television student. So she's asking about the biggest challenge of live television. Has anything ever gone wrong while you were on the air? I'm sure not, right?
Oh, no, of course not. No, we never had anything go wrong. Yeah, I used to say I'd walk in on Friday and say, guys, it's Friday, nothing could go wrong. Yeah, plenty has happened. I was on the air with Ann Martin, my co-anchor. I loved her. And she was talking about a story regarding the Pope, and she called him the poop. And that was kind of hard. I'm trying to think of any really disastrous things that happened. Now, there's one story I cannot tell this story. I'm not on family TV.
Okay.
I was, no, I'm not going to tell that one either.
Oh, wow.
I can't. Oh,
good. One you can tell.
Hosting the news in Peoria, you sat on this stool, and I was on that one night, and one of the legs broke, and I didn't fall, but I almost did. That was like, whoa, that was very close to being a disaster. I remember one time, this wasn't a disaster. We did the Sunday show, the talk show. I did it with a woman named Kelly Lang, who's still around. She's writing books. And she was deathly afraid of flying in small planes, which is funny because she used to be a weather girl flying in small planes, reporting, but anyway. So the deal was I flew in my plane, I was a pilot, and landed, we did the show, and the end of the show we were supposed to take off and fly around. And that was it, bye-bye. So there was something with the airplane, I can't remember what it was. I told her, I got to do this, but this is, not quite right. I should never have said that to her. And we took off, and it was obvious that something wasn't quite right with the airplane. I'll never forget, get this plane on the ground, Paul, now. Just get it down on the ground. So that was the disaster avoided. But if I think of any more, I'll tell you.
Okay. We'll stay tuned.
All right.
All right, here's a question from John, class of 2005. Who was your best boss and why? And what should fellow Wildcats look for in their bosses?
That is really a wonderful question. That's so good. This is not a, being disrespectful to any of all of the bosses that might be watch this someday, but the one that I remember the most, that probably helped me the most and was unbelievable, was a guy named Dennis Swanson, who's still with Fox, I think. Dennis was the one who discovered Oprah Winfrey because he was running the station in Chicago, and she was a weather person there, and apparently was instrumental in getting her syndicated show. But I was, I'd left Channel 4, didn't know what I was going to do, and Dennis was kind of a fan of mine and was responsible for getting me to Channel 7. And he's a big, tough ex-Marine, but man, he knew broadcasting. And he wasn't afraid to tell you what he thought. And I remember walking in there, and I said, Dennis, what do you want me to be? What do you want me to do? He says, Paul, just be you. Be yourself. We do that here. There's no airs here. Just be you. And hopefully I did that. He was, we got into a couple of real fights, he and I, over this and that, I can't remember. But like I say, he was tough. Not physical fights, but arguments. But I loved him. He just was something about him that was so good and made you so much better than you really were. So he's probably the one. I think another one is Bob Long, who was my news director at Channel 4 for a while, has now passed away. One of the old guard journalists. I mean, he got done with the election. Paul, have some Scotch whiskey. Bob, I don't drink Scotch whiskey, but he was one of those guys, and he was great. He allowed us to do the investigative stuff. He gave me what I wanted to do that. I remember one time he told the producer that he said, "Don't give minutia to Paul. Just let him go out and do his interviews. Don't bother him with that stuff." But he was a great, great guy. So those two, I remember.
They had your best interest at heart. They were
they did.
Not necessarily easy to work for.
No,
they were demanding,
weren't.
But they made you better.
Dennis especially wasn't easy to work for, but he was right.
Right.
If he thought that what you did was awful, he'd tell you. And that's another thing that you've got to be able to do, is you've got to be able to take that criticism. It's not personal, but God, I guess you're right. And be better for it.
And not let it break you, right? I mean, listen to it and be better.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just, he's doing it because, you can be better. You can be better. And do not get thin-skinned if you reach this point. People that write you or leave messages on your phone about how awful you are. When I came to LA, and I had never experienced this before, I was getting those. Because my hair was too long and I was a new guy. And it just crushed me. Why is he writing me this letter and telling me how bad I am? Don't let that get to you. Because number one, they're watching. And number two, there's an old adage, love me or hate me, but don't ignore me. They're not ignoring you. So I don't know how we got off on that.
That's good. Great. You've been asked a lot of questions. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to share with us? And I would also tell our audience we have, it looks like, just about 5 more minutes. So if you've got a question, please get to the mic and you can ask your question.
I would say
anything any more.
I would say the people that are I'm sorry, young people that are graduating that want to get into the business. You've got to reach out to anything and everybody you can. Okay. On your audition reel, on the reel that you send to the stations, all right, there should be a couple of, start with a couple of on-camera things, stand-ups or in-studio stuff. Be creative in the writing. They love that. They love people that can tell stories. All right, so that's the first thing they're going to see. So make sure that's really well written. Okay, the performance, try to make it real. That's one thing, but the writing is very important.
Writing's critical.
And then a couple of 3 stories that you have done. And if you haven't done them, get a camera person or whatever, go out there and just, fake them, the stories. You've got to have those on your reel. And those ought to be, again, they want people that can tell stories, not just the words, And then the officer went to the victim and, they've got to, that's important. So I would say that's because they'll put those on and in 20 seconds they're going to know, do I want this person or don't I, and why? So, have a knowledge of the events around you. And social media is very important now. They're going to check that out. How they do that, I don't know. Facebook or whatever.
Your profile, I mean, how you appear on social media?
Yeah,
Is
and
that-
what you say and what you put on there. I've got a son who, was putting some really stupid stuff on there.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, your prospective employer is going to look at that. Don't do that. So social
great
media
advice.
is very important.
And it's out there forever once you put it out there, right?
It's out in the ether.
Yeah. That's great advice. Anything from the audience that we have any questions, anybody that wants to ask? We have one coming to the microphone here. Great.
I just wanted to ask, because you said you had traveled a lot at certain times throughout your career, how that did affect your home life and your family.
I didn't hear that. Loud.
Because you said that you had traveled a lot,
Yes.
doing different stuff across many different roles and positions. I was just curious on how that affected your home life and how you worked those two together.
Oh, that's a good question.
And I will say before you answer, you have about 2 minutes
Okay.
for that answer.
During that time of my life, I was going with my wife, my current wife. So she could come along on some of those, which was great. But I couldn't see my kids when I was gone. Like I was gone for 3 weeks to China, which was wonderful. But I don't think it had a real effect on it. It would now, because that would, I would terribly miss not being here. But then it was like I had to do it. I wanted to do it, and we made it work. My kids and I made it work. But there were wonderful opportunities. So in that respect, it was much better on my life. It was a good thing.
And you enjoy what you're doing now?
I do now.
Yeah?
I must tell you that in the beginning, it is really a tough transition because I'm a stimulation junkie, and I thrived on the stress, and I thrived on the breaking news, and I thrived on getting in there and running down there and doing that every day. And it went from that to, gee, honey, where do we go to lunch today?
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
like, and that was really
Yeah.
hard. But now, I
That's
do what I
great.
want to do when I want to do it. I'm enjoying life.
Well, that's great.
Very much.
And you're here today sharing everything you've learned with us. So thank you so much. It's been great.
It's been a great
a real
pleasure.
pleasure.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. And we thank all of our Wildcats in the audience as well and everyone that's generated questions for us. And with that, thank you so much for joining us at this edition of Cats in the Corner Office.